What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and it's a big one today. I wasn't expecting to make any videos today, or at least I wasn't planning to. I was going to leave them till tomorrow onwards, but obviously we've had the blank and double game week announcements now, and they're officially in the FPL website. So we know who's going to play in game week 19 twice, we know who's not playing in game week 18, and there's still some other double game weeks that are going to come down the line and other blank game weeks as well. So I want to talk about them in this video. I'm going to go through the fixtures for all those playing in Game Week 18. I'm going to go through the fixtures for all those with double game weeks in Game Week 19. I'm going to talk about the other fixtures that still need to be moved. I'm going to talk about some more blank fixtures that are going to come down the line, as well as some initial chip strategy talking as well. So if this is useful, please do give it a like. It took a little while to put together, and obviously subscribe if you are new around here as well. Let's jump into it. Okay, so quickly first, just a little bit of an explanation about what's happened for anyone that doesn't follow this regularly or maybe hasn't played FPL before. So I've talked about in other videos what a blank and a double game week is. So blank game week is when a fixture gets moved out of a game week, because all the game weeks are scheduled already from 1 to 38, and then sometimes a fixture will be moved. Maybe it's because of cup games, maybe it's because of the weather, maybe it's because of a COVID postponement. In this case, they're splitting up game week 18 for like a mid-season winter break. So half the fixtures are on. So there was 10 fixtures obviously in game week 18. Now there's only 5. So 5 fixtures are on and 5 fixtures are off. So what's happened is the 5 fixtures are off. Those 10 teams will now not play in game week 18, and instead they're going to play in game week 19, that fixture, as well as the other one that was already scheduled for that week as well. So they're going to play twice in game week 19. So on screen, hopefully this is readable, right? I've got all the teams there in the badges, then all their fixtures as well. I've kind of tried to colour code them for fixture difficulty based on the team they are versus the team they're playing. And these are all the teams that are playing in game week 18. So Sheffield United, Newcastle, Wolves, Everton, Man City, Brighton, Villa, Spurs, Arsenal and Crystal Palace. So any team not listed here is not playing in game week 18. And I'll come on to that in just a minute. So the likes of Man United, Chelsea, etc. Now, I've highlighted game week 18 in blue because they have a fixture. So obviously basically any of the players you've got from the teams I've not mentioned that aren't on this list will not play in game week 18. So if you go into that week with them, they're not going to play. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on how many you have. And then obviously chip strategy comes into it as well, which I'm going to talk about at the end. But the reason I've put game week 16 to 21, because it's 2 fixtures before the blank and double and 2 fixtures afterwards, right? So this is going to come down to a lot of planning. This is just initial reactions and initial kind of talking about what's going on. But obviously, you're going to have to look at your own team, your own chip strategy, and figure out basically what the hell you're going to do. Because what you don't want to do is fixate on the blanks or fixate on the doubles and forget about the game weeks around. That's especially true of the double game week team. So, for example, right, Man City are on this list because they're playing in game week 18. They've got Everton away, Chelsea away. 2 tricky fixtures, to be fair. I think the next 2, game week 14 and 15, are okay. But then Everton and Chelsea are tricky enough. But then they got really good fixtures. Brighton, Crystal Palace, West Brom, Sheffield United. Right? It doesn't get much better than that. And I think now, because Man City struggled against West Brom last night, people are going to be saying, well, we don't need them. But I think, you know, given they could have beaten Fulham by more and they smashed Burnley 5-0, and to be honest, they should have scored more goals past West Brom last night. I'm not particularly worried about them. And Brighton, Palace, West Brom, Sheffield United are fixtures that I would like to have Man City players for. So even though they're not playing twice in game week 19, they still have Crystal Palace at home, which is a decent enough fixture. So what I'm saying is, if you fixated on getting loads of players out for the double game week, you might ignore Man City, who've got a really good fixture run. Same for Spurs, right? They're another team that stand out. So game week 16 and 17 is Fulham and Leeds. Everyone's been looking at those fixtures saying they need Spurs players. If you've got rid of them like me, you've been eyeing up maybe getting them back for those weeks. Then they've got Aston Villa in the blank game week 18, good. Then they've got Sheffield United away in the double, right? And what you're going to see in a minute when we talk about the double game weeks is it's going to be very hard to fit all these players in, because if Man City players, Spurs players are expensive, and then the teams like Man United, Chelsea, etc. that are playing in double game week 19, and Liverpool, by the way, so Salah, Mane, Trent, Robertson as well, it's going to be very hard to have all them and have Spurs and Man City players as well because of the price. So that's where the chip strategy is going to come in play. Like, if you've not got your free hit anymore and you've used your first wildcard, then it does get tricky. And I'll talk about that at the end as well. But chips are going to come into play, and this is why I said a few weeks ago or a couple of game weeks ago to not to use your free hit for that Aston Villa blank game week, because in most cases it just wasn't needed, and this is going to be way more important. So yeah, basically you want to look for teams with green before and after, because they are ones you might still want. Everton, for example, are kind of in the middle, so they got Man City in game week 16 is difficult, and obviously for Everton, a lot of players, we don't own a lot of players from Everton, but Calvert-Lewin is in a lot of teams, mine especially as well, or he's in mine as well. West Ham's good in game week 17, but then it's Wolves away in game week 18, so it's okay. And then Aston Villa away in game week 19, which again is okay. Leicester and Newcastle. So the fixtures aren't awful. So if you've got money tied up in Calvert-Lewin, maybe you'd want to keep him. And what I would say is one of the chip strategies you'll hear about a lot is you free hit in game week 18. And then you basically have your team ready for game week 19. So you could ignore, if you're going to do that strategy, you can ignore the fixtures in game week 18, because these are all the teams you're going to get players from anyway. You just activate your free hit in game week 18 and you build your team kind of for game week 16, 17, but also 19 onwards. So that's one chip strategy. That's the one you're going to hear about a lot, I think, if you've got your free hit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way you have to go. So, for example, if you think Man City and Spurs are worth having before and after, you could just, like if you've got 3 Spurs players, for example, let's say you've got Dyer or Reguilon and you've got Son and Kane, that's 3 players of your first 11 already. Then say you've got Kevin De Bruyne and maybe Diaz, that's 2 more, so that's 5 already. And if you've got a couple of other players that play in game week 18, you could not use your free hit in that week, and then use your free hit in game week 19 to get all the double game week players, where, I don't know, Man United, for example, who are going to double, we'll talk about them in a sec, maybe you only want Fernandes, right? You don't want all the other players, but for a double game week, you might want Harry Maguire or Wan-Bissaka, whoever it might be, and so you could use your free hit then instead. Obviously, again, if you've not got them, it's a little bit trickier. So these are all the teams playing in game week 18. So there's 10 teams altogether, 5 fixtures, and there's some pretty good fixtures in there as well. Sheffield United against Newcastle at home. I wouldn't usually go on Sheffield United players, but maybe a defender. Newcastle obviously playing Sheffield United could get Callum Wilson in. So there's some good fixtures there, and there's also some good fixtures before and after, specifically Spurs and Man City, and maybe Everton are teams you want to look at because they're teams where we've already got a lot of players in. Okay, and now these are the teams that are going to play twice in game week 19. So West Ham, West Brom, Leicester, Chelsea, Leeds, Southampton, Fulham, Man United, Liverpool and Burnley. So there's some big teams in there, the likes of Bruno Fernandes, like I've said, Salah, Mane, Robertson, Trent. A lot of people have got Bamford and maybe a Leeds defender. Chelsea defenders are really popular. They're all playing. Jamie Vardy, who's been doing really well recently. West Ham, Souček, Soufal, Balbuena, Bowen, Antonio when he's fit, could all be really good options. And also, by the way, West Ham arguably have the best double game week. They have Burnley at home and West Brom at home. So I'm looking to possibly double or triple up on them. And again, I've not got my first wild card, so it's a little bit different. I'll probably have to build my team with double game week 19 in mind and probably use my free hit in game week 18 just because of the way I'm set up. But there's lots of things to think about before then. But basically, I've highlighted the double game week in green for every single team. But obviously, it's trickier for some teams than others. So Fulham, for example, Chelsea at home, Man United at home. You're probably not going to want Fulham players for that, although they are cheap, so they could be good enablers, especially in attack. The reason I've highlighted green is because it's double game week, right? I just get excited to buy them. So I think it's good for everyone to have 2 fixtures. So Liverpool and Man United are probably the most interesting because they play each other, which isn't ideal. So Liverpool got Man United at home and Burnley at home. So my initial instinct is Salah is probably the best captain this week. But as always with a double game, there's usually some player that does much better than the one that everyone will go for. So, for example, Leeds have got Brighton at home and Southampton at home. That's 2 really good fixtures, I think. On their day, both teams can be tough, but Leeds are extremely good. I think Bamford, Brighton at home, Southampton at home is ridiculous. Also, by the way, a defender, there's usually obviously just because it's happened before doesn't mean it'll happen again, but there's usually a defender that does really well as well. So I'm thinking Chelsea defenders, Fulham away, Leicester away. Could they get 2 clean sheets? Could Chilwell, Zuma or Reece James get an attacking return as well? They've got to be on our list of players to look at. And then also, obviously, you want to look at the game weeks after as well. So Fulham, not only have they got a double game week, right? Bearing in mind it's a tricky one, but then they've got Brighton and West Brom, so maybe they're okay to have. Obviously, Liverpool before and after, they got Newcastle away, Southampton away, decent. Game week 19 double, then Spurs away, tricky, but then West Ham away, so it gets a little bit better. So plenty of teams having a double game week. I think The teams that I would probably be not necessarily looking to avoid, but wouldn't be top of my list. Fulham, like I said, I think Burnley, West Ham away, and Liverpool away. You're only really going to be looking at Chris Wood or a defender, and I think Chris Wood's going to struggle against those two defences, and the defence is going to struggle to get clean sheets as well against Antonio, hopefully if he's fit, and obviously Mo Salah, Mane, etc. I don't think Jota will be back by that point. I think one of the more interesting teams is Leicester. So I put a tweet out last night saying how many points certain players had scored in the last 4 game weeks, because I'll talk about it on the preview probably, but a lot of the talk has been about, if you drop Spurs players, you're stupid. But Jamie Vardy over the last 4 matches, I think he's beat Harry Kane by 1 point or something like that. So he's actually been doing pretty well. Obviously, a lot of that came from the Brighton game. But they got Crystal Palace away and Newcastle away beforehand. Obviously, they blank in Game Week 18. So all these teams don't play in Game Week 18. And then they got Southampton at home and Chelsea at home. Chelsea's not ideal, I get it, but it's not too bad. Then Everton away, Leeds at home afterwards. So Jamie Vardy potentially is someone that could come in and do really well. But this is where you've got to kind of weigh things up, because obviously Kane in Game Week 16 and 17 has Villa and Fulham. I think it's Fulham and... Fulham and Leeds, I believe it is. But either way, 2 pretty good fixtures. West Ham probably got the best double game week. West Brom, maybe someone like Johnston could be good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be touching West Brom at all. And like I said, I like the Leeds one. So one thing to consider, which we'll talk about in Chip Strategy, is using your bench boost. So this is going to be easier if you've still got your first wildcard left, because you can use it in Game Week 16 with this in mind. I think there is a good opportunity to do it here, because one, this is going to be the biggest double game week of the season. It should be anyway. And 2, there's a few teams here where you could get cheap players from. So, for example, for your bench boost, this is. So, for example, West Ham defenders are like 4.6 million or below, most of them. You could get Johnson as your second goalkeeper. And then you've got Dallas or Eiling at Leeds, with Brighton at home, Southampton at home. All really cheap. And everybody, I think... Not everybody, okay, not literally everybody, but a lot of people are going to build to having Souček on the bench as well. So Souček, West Ham defender, Johnston and Dallas, that is going to be your key 4 players you're going to see a lot of people have on the bench. It could be Kyle Walker-Peters for Southampton instead. It could be, Lookman or someone like that instead of Souček on the bench. I'm not saying it has to be those players, but they are the teams that are probably going to make the bench boost easiest, I would say. So they're the double game week fixtures. You've got to start bearing these in mind, I would say. Maybe not so much over the next couple of weeks, but start thinking about it. One thing I would say is, if you're going to use your free hit in Game Week 18 to avoid all these blank teams, you don't want to go into that game week with 2 transfers, because you'll only get 1 on the way out. So you want to make sure you're kind of planning ahead on how you're going to use your transfers. So it's good to have players for the double, but there are game weeks before that, game week 14, 15, 16, 17, and even 18 as well. I've just counted that wrong. I'm pretty sure it's 5, not 6. There's still points to be had. There's plenty of points to be had before we get to the double. So keep it in mind, but don't fixate on it too much, even though it's really hard not to, and I definitely will be. So I mentioned at the start that there would be other double game weeks as well, and other blank game weeks too. So the ones I've just talked about, blank in game week 18 and double in game week 19, are the only ones that are official or have happened. Obviously, we've had blank game weeks already, which I'm going to talk about now, but we don't know when future ones will be yet. Okay, not quite anyway. Now, I've got basically the top picture with Burnley versus Man United, Manchester City versus Villa, and Villa versus Newcastle. They are the blank fixtures we've already had. They will have to be scheduled into another game week before the end of the season. So these teams, all of these teams, so Villa twice, Man City, Man United, Burnley and Newcastle, will all have a double game week that I've not already talked about. Now, exactly when that is, we don't know. If you're not following Ben Crellin on Twitter, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're on Twitter, you have to follow him. He's basically the king of the blanks and double game weeks. He has this in his head and on Twitter way before it happens. Like, he knew that game week 18 would be a blank and that it would go into game week 19. He's been saying it for months. And basically, he's saying that they're not necessarily... These matches, like, for example, Villa are not having a double game week in game week 19. It could be put in there, but... He's talking about the winter break there. The Premier League are probably not going to want to disrupt it. It's there for a reason, to give the players and the teams a break So putting a fixture in there to disrupt the winter break is probably not what they're going to try and do. And there's going to be midweeks later on in the season when they could put it in instead, right? So obviously that's what happens. If they got a game on the weekend, no game week midweek, they could put their extra fixture in there. So this is something to bear in mind, that Burnley, Man United, Man City, Villa and Newcastle are going to have a double game week at some point later on. If it gets moved into game week 19, it just makes using chips in those even more important, like bench boost, potentially wildcard if you still got it, free hit, etc. But at some point they're probably just going to be moved into another game week where they are the only, like, it could just be that, you know, Man City and Villa gets put into a puts into a game week and no other teams double in that week, and so obviously you're only just then fixated on the likes of, I don't know, Grealish, Watkins, Martinez, De Bruyne, Diaz, whoever it is, and they're the only players that are going to double. So at that point you have to just use your normal transfers to kind of cover it, and at that point maybe hits will be worthwhile, but that's all something to be discussed down the road. So there are some other fixtures that still need to be rescheduled. They are the 3 so far, but there's going to be more, so let's talk about them as well. So again, if you're not following Ben, you probably should be, if you use Twitter anyway. So there's going to be more double game weeks that we don't know about, and again, a bit like the ones that haven't been rescheduled yet, which I just talked about, we're just going to have to use possibly a second wildcard and just normal transfers to kind of deal with it. So as you can see from the tweets I've picked out, we can expect 4 to 6 of the double game week, of game week 29 fixtures to become blank, and then double game week fixtures due to the FA Cup quarterfinals. So the 4 to 6 fixtures, because the teams in the FA Cup that get stopped in game week 29 will then become double game weeks at some other point, right? So he goes on to say he's using his second wildcard to deal with those blanks, but this is the worst thing at the end. It's really difficult to predict how they'll reschedule these blanks. They could be moved to game week 26 to 28 if possible, but again, we don't know that yet, and we don't know how soon before we're going to find that out. So for anyone that's used their first wildcard, like me for example, one of my initial thoughts was, well, is there a possibility we could just use that to deal with this first lot of double game weeks? But if there's going to be another 4 to 6 fixtures where they get called off and that's a blank game week, that's going to become super annoying to then not have a wildcard or a free hit. So it still seems like free hit is probably good to use in game week 18, 19. If you can manage it without game week 18 or 19, like not using it, fine, you can save it for later on. But it probably is going to be the easiest. So then your second wildcard then becomes even more valuable because depending on how the fixtures fall, you either build your team to not worry about the blank game week, so you get in enough players that play in that blank game week, and then you wildcard out of it. So for the rest of the season, there shouldn't be, barring any like disruptions to weather or COVID or etc., there shouldn't be any more blank game weeks. So at that point, you just use your wildcard for the rest of the season, or perhaps you use your wildcard before to plan for the doubles, and then you start using transfers to go for the blanks as well. So this isn't super useful right now because we don't know how they're going to fall. We don't know how important the wildcard is going to be, but we do know, looking at this, and Ben is very rarely wrong, if ever, that there are going to be some more blank game weeks, and it is going to be important to have a chip there. So for me, even though I've used my first wildcard, I'm going to try and get through this first double game week without them, because I do think the way the fixtures have fallen for game week 29 do make it slightly easier. For game week 19, do make it slightly easier for those of us that use the wildcard. Obviously, if you've still got it and you're in a good rank position, then yeah, you are in a much better position than some of us. But I do think the games in there, like Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, teams we've already got players from and don't really want to lose anyway, is not that bad. But for this, we're probably going to need some more chips. So keep that in mind. I know this gets a bit complicated at times, but ultimately the thing is, if you can save your chips for as long as possible, that is probably the best strategy. Okay, so I've touched on chip strategy a bit as I've been talking through the other different sections of the video, because obviously it does become more important, and it's impossible to give blanket advice here because not everyone's got the same chips and not everyone has the same squad and not everybody wants the same players. Just because, me or someone else is going for X player doesn't mean you're going to want them as well. And because you're not, like, I don't know, maybe you don't want to go for loads of Man United or Chelsea players, etc. That might change the strategy of when you free hit, whether it's game week 18 or 19. But if I just go for some kind of overall thoughts, and there might be more that comes from this later on as we get closer to the game weeks, because obviously this has only been out a few hours at the time of recording, so there's probably a few things left to think about. But if you've still got your first wild card left, Then bench boosting in Game Week 19, given the players that I've just talked about when I was talking about Game Week 19 fixtures like Dallas, Johnston, Souček, etc., obviously you have to use that by Game Week 16. So when you use that, you're thinking ahead to Game Week 19 and also about potentially using your bench boost. The one thing I would say about that is, and it's not necessarily an issue because a lot of people want strong benches anyway, but any extra money you put on that bench boost that you wouldn't usually, obviously it's great for that one chip use in that game week, but then you're left with that money on the bench, and until you use your second wild card, you're not able to kind of shuffle the funds around, right? So you're not stuck, but it would take extra transfers to then get that money out of the bench. So right now I have a non-playing keeper, I have Souček, I have a non-playing defender, and I have a 4.5 million defender as well. So if I wanted to improve that, I'd have to spend an extra 0.5 on one of my defenders, an extra 0.5 on my goalkeepers. So that's $1 million I'm taking out of my normal team just to use the bench boost in one game week. So that's something to consider. But I do think if you've got your first wildcard left, that probably is the way. And I know people are going to be asking me about wildcard teams, not even going to think about that for a few weeks. Like, if I was you and you have your first wildcard, I would make some rough drafts just because the first wildcard has to be used by the 28th of December at 1:30 in the afternoon. But the previous deadline is on Boxing Day, the 26th. I can't remember what time. I think it's 11 a.m, right? So Game Week 15 starts 11 a.m. on the 26th. And then Game Week 16, you have to use your wildcard between that time. Starts on the 28th, 2 days later at 1:30. So you get just over 48 hours to use it. Obviously, you can plan ahead on who you're going to bring in. It's definitely worth thinking about. You don't want to spend Christmas Day looking at wildcard teams. But in terms of activating it, you don't have much time. So you don't want to leave it until then to decide which players to get. So I won't be talking about wildcard teams for a few weeks, but I'll try and get a video out at some point. If you've used your first wildcard, this is a position I'm in, I'm definitely looking at using my free hit in either Game Week 18 or 19. As it stands, it will probably be Game Week 18, not 19, because I've already got Fernandes and I've already got Chelsea defenders, and I'm looking to get West Ham players in potentially anyway. I've already got Bamford and Dallas. It probably makes more sense for me to use it in Game Week 18 when a lot of the players I won't have play, and obviously the ones I'm looking to get or looking to have play in Game Week 19 but not in 18, right? So I'm probably looking at using it in Game Week 18. But if you've got a good team for Game Week 18 and not for 19, you could just free hit then instead. If you've used your wildcard as well, this is something that I'm thinking about. You could use your bench boost later on in the season. Now, for anyone that's been watching my videos for a while, you'll know that I used my bench boost in a single game week. I think it was last year. And I got a ridiculous score. It was like 36 points, right? But don't get me wrong, it was a little bit lucky. Dwight McNeil, who I don't even know if he's scored at all this season, he got like 14 points or something like that. I had a Burnley defender, got a clean sheet, and I had 2 Southampton defenders. I think it was 1 defender, 1 keeper, who also got a clean sheet as well. So I got a bit fortunate, but it did kind of show me that you could just use it in a single game week or use it for a double game week later on in the season. I think my main thing with the bench boost is you ideally want to use it after a wildcard because you can set up for it. So right now, for example, I've just said I've got Souček on the bench and a playing defender. If I want another 2, I've got to use 2 transfers between now and the double to get those players in. So I've got Game Week 14, 15, 16, 17, 4 transfers. Then I'm using my free hit, so there's no need for a transfer then. I've got one more transfer in Game Week 19. So that's 5 transfers between now and the double game week. And if I use 2 of them to get extra bench players, who in most weeks I'm not going to play anyway, that leaves me with just 3 transfers to manage it. So right now I'm thinking I'll use my bench boost if I'm in a good position. If not, I'll wait till later on in the season. I think the bench boost is overrated a little bit. I think people think they're going to get like 40 to 50 points, which could happen on a really good double game week, but it's very unlikely. I think you're more likely to get like 16 to 24 at absolute max. And don't get me wrong, that's a good boost. And if you've got a great team, you should go for it. If you've got your first wildcard, you should go for it. But I don't think, and it's always hard to actually measure come the end of the season, but for anyone that's not going to wildcard, I'm not sure spending extra transfers on the bench and ignoring your first 11 in the long run is worth more than 16 to 24 points. I would rather, I don't want to burn the bench boost, I'm not saying that, but I would probably rather use a weaker one or use it later on in the season, maybe for a single game where you can get better players in, than use it in a double. Of course, it's ideal in a double. I'm not saying it's not, but if you've used your first wild card, that's something to consider. I think second wild card, whether you've used your first one or not, it's probably better off used to manage the blank game weeks basically later on, which I spoke about already. Obviously, you saw Ben saying that as well, but it kind of makes sense to do that because it is going to be tricky to manage them. And you don't want to use too many kind of transfers or save your free hit because there's going to be other double game weeks as well to worry about too. And triple captain, like people ask me every single week, should I use my triple captain this week? If a player's got a good fixture, go for it. But I would always rather try and save it for a double game week. Now, again, people that have been watching my channel for a while know I've not made the best use of triple captain, right? I've only ever got, the highest score is 9 into 27, which was Sergio Aguero, and I think he only played in one game in the double. I had Manny last year, who got injured in the first game, didn't score any points, so it's been frustrating, but FPL was always about betting on the highest probability, and most of the time a player playing twice has got more chance of scoring than a player playing once. Obviously dependent on the fixtures, right? I'm trying not to use my triple captain on a Fulham player, but I do want to use it in a double game week. So for me, if I don't use my bench boost in game week 19 and I've used my free hit in game week 18, I could conceivably, because I've not got my first wild card, triple captain in game week 19. I don't think that's out of the question. A lot of people will be looking to bench boost if they've got their wild card, but for those of us that don't, we could look to use it then. If not, for one of the later ones on in the season as well. So that's basic overview of chip strategy. Again, you could come up with something different. There'll be people with different combinations. I know the question will be, what if I've not got my wild card or my free hit? And at that point, you just have to balance out a certain, like, you don't necessarily have to go into the blank with 11 players. You could go in there with 7, 8, 9 decent players, and then also try and manage the double game. We can maybe take a few hits as well. So I'll try and have a bit more of a think about that. It's difficult to do that when you've not got the chips, but that's something to consider. You might have to go for a bit more of a balanced team and maybe miss out on a couple of players, especially in that blank. So there we go. That's it for this one. That's my initial reactions and thoughts on a kind of double game week and blank game week strategy guide, including all the fixtures, who's playing, who's worth targeting, and a quick look at some of the players as well. Obviously, as we get closer to the blanks and doubles, we might take a little bit more of a look at specific players, specific teams and stuff like that. But obviously, it's also around the Christmas period as well. So there's a lot of game weeks as well to consider. And like I said, there's still points to be had. So don't fixate too much on game week 18 and 19, but they are still really important. So please do give it a like if you did enjoy it and if it was helpful to kind of get your thoughts and stuff like that. Really would be appreciated. And also subscribe if you're new around here as well. If you're not already signed up on Patreon, there is a link in the description below, patreon.com/letstalkfpl. There's some extra benefits over there like Slack access, WhatsApp access, early team reveals, videos into podcasts and all stuff like that as well. So make sure to check that out. Click that link below and I'll just bring up all the legends that are already signed up. Much appreciated to all you lot, and anyone else that wants to sign up, like I said, you can do that with the link in the description below. And a big shout out to Marcus H, who has signed up since the last video / stream as well. So there we go. There's the video that I wasn't going to do on Wednesday. I'll be back tomorrow with a team selection video, and obviously we'll have a live stream at the end of the game week as well, and then hopefully get the preview and captaincy out on Friday, etc. So plenty of content to come. Another quick turnaround. But how does blanks and double game weeks to come? And look, Christmas, some people say, is the most wonderful time of the year. For me, it's the blanks and double game weeks. It's a great time. It can be a bit of a headache to plan for it, but if it works out, there's some huge scores to come and potentially some big green arrows as well. So do enjoy it. If you kind of missed anything or didn't get anything in this video, please do go back and watch certain sections, and if not, leave me a comment below and let me know what questions and stuff you have, and I'll try and get back to as many as possible. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, and I'll see you soon.